Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our ability panel today. I'm your moderator, JC, co-host of the HR Talk podcast, and also the host of Interesting Things with JC. It's my pleasure to be here, invited as a special guest on behalf of Wendy Sellers, the HR lady, and our dear friends Allison and Jeff. We're going to be finding about them, their background, and how they fit into the mix of this amazing yet interesting topic coming up here momentarily. So our panelists today, they're here to break down the stigma of people with disabilities, hence why we call this the Ability Panel. So let's go ahead and meet everyone that's here, starting with Wendy Sellers.
Hey, everybody. Wendy Sellers, the HR lady. And I am here to help employers fill jobs, to be quite honest, because I am so busy right now. And everybody is dealing with the great resignation and turnover. And where do we find people? We don't have enough people. And we do. We're just looking at the wrong people. One of the set of people that we're not looking at is individuals with a disability, a physical or mental challenge. And so that's why I asked everybody to be here today to talk about that openly and honestly, and to meet my friends who are just awesome.
Wendy, thank you so much. Moving around the room, if we could please, Jeff, a little bit about you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Arsenault. I am 50 years old, and I do have cerebral palsy. I abbreviate it CP. So if I use CP, it means cerebral palsy. A big part of what I do today is a result of 20 years of management experience in both grocery store and retail. And the reason why I do what I do is I hit a point in my life where my career struggled. And when I had to rebound, I realized how hard it was. And for the first time in my life, I found myself with an awesome resume. But guess what? Could not get a full-time job. And I started asking why. So that started the career I got now as a trainer and a public speaker. And one of my missions is to come together as a society, encourage people with disabilities to get out there and look for work, and encourage employers to take advantage of the assets that people with disabilities bring to the table. And I'll talk about that more. Really looking forward to the next half hour to 45 minutes.
Jeff, can't thank you enough, and we're deeply looking forward to getting deeper into that story as well. We also have another panelist here, fantastic professional in her field. Please welcome Allison. Tell us a little bit about you, please.
Hello. Like you said, I'm Allison, and I am a person with a disability. I was 15 years old when I broke my back in a snowboarding competition. So I've got just about 20 years now using the wheelchair, and full use of my upper body because I broke my thoracic vertebrae. So I was in high school, and that's when I first became familiar with a lot of the programs that are available to help me, and made it through college, grad school, got my first job, and then started my own business. And so now I am a mental health therapist, and I own my own private practice.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for being willing to be here and share your story as well. Wendy, I got a question for you on this one in general. So why aren't employers hiring more disabled people to fix the current worker shortage that's taking place out there?
Oh, thanks for asking that. I mean, I think it's a twofold, threefold, fourfold. It's a lot of reasons, but I think the number one reason is they're afraid. They think they're going to just get bad workers, shoddy workers, workers that can't perform well, that are going to need a lot of breaks or assistance or whatever it might be. And they're also afraid that they're going to get sued because they don't know what they're doing in the disability world. They don't know, the employers don't know what they're doing. And so instead of asking questions to the candidates or to panels like us, they just avoid it altogether and find other reasons to not hire those individuals. And then on the second part of that, I want to say, like, I don't even think employers are thinking about it. It's not their ideal candidate. They don't know the laws, which is where I come in. They don't know that you're supposed to be giving people accommodation. Again, I personally have dealt with this a lot in my practice as an HR consultant, where I have to educate employers. Hey, it's not what you think. And first of all, you're missing out on great workers. Second of all, you're breaking the law.
Jeff, I know you had a few thoughts about employee morale in this regard. Isn't that right?
Yes, thank you. Morale is one of my pet peeves, and I got a bunch of them. But morale is up there as number one. And why? When morale goes up, production goes up. A CEO looks at numbers, and morale turns into production. Production turns into numbers. Numbers turns into more hires. So how can we affect that number? I'll take me as an example. I work for minimum wage. I got a full-time job. I give 150% effort. I might not do the 100% of the production that you need, but what I do is I motivate the team. And I don't do it directly. I do it indirect. All I know how to do at JC is work my tail off. So I'm not going in, I want to get hired, so I want to change the way TJ Maxx, they got a morale issue. That's not what I'm doing. I'm being me. Yeah. I'm working my tail off. So when people look at me, two things can happen. The guy or lady or gentleman who's given 50, they're gonna look at me and they might critique themselves and say, well, he's given 150. Why can't I give 80? If that guy with CP is doing what he's doing, shame on me. I gotta take a checkup from the neck up. And then the other thing, people look at me, I smile, I'm happy. I communicate the way we used to do. I tell people hello, whether I know you or not. And what does that do? That makes you feel like somebody on that team wants you there. And it's not about what you're doing. It's just about enjoying who you work with. And in my opinion, we need to get back to that ASAP. And people with disabilities can take a lead role in doing that.
So you're basically saying taking loyalty and enthusiasm and pushing that to the next level in a way, right?
I didn't even talk about loyalty, JC. The deal with loyalty is, I know from my management background, is a big expense to a corporation is turnover.
Yeah.
And why am I sitting there selling people with disabilities and talking about lessening the turnover line? It's because when we get an opportunity, this is a sad fact of life, but it's true. We know we might not ever get another shot. So guess what? We're going to give you everything we got, because they're free. be shot. So it's kind of fear-based, but in a positive way.
Indirect motivation. Turning to the person to your left or right. Finding that inspiration, that fire in the belly that ignites and sends it to that next level. Taking your team from A to B in a way that you might not necessarily find in a worker other than someone that has that desire and intent, just like Jeff right there. I'll tell you what, there's something extremely commendable about that, but I've got a question here for Allison real quick. What do you wish that coworkers and managers knew about people with disabilities in general?
Well, disabilities in general, there's such a wide spectrum. And so I want them to know that they probably don't know, right? So a lot of people in college were gone through this training in some class where they were sat in a wheelchair and then asked to go around and live a day in the life, or like put a blindfold on and try to figure out what it's like. And I feel like those were the most damaging experiences for those people, because if someone that's blind knows how to do 1,000,000 things, they've been doing this every single second for years, right? Or me in a wheelchair, like I could do circles around you while you're still trying to figure out how to go left or right. So you are getting a miseducation. And so that's really upsetting that they still continue to do those. And then people go into the world thinking, wow, like I can't imagine how hard that is. Or they can't imagine the adaptations that a person's like, I have a friend whose arms are a bit shorter, and they're like, they don't see how it's possible, when actually there's amazing, really, really rad adaptations where she can outperform a lot of people. So I want people to go into it saying, I don't know, and I shouldn't assume that I know. But there's a lot of resources to find out and to support, so that they can do just as much as the rest of their staff or more. And like Jeff was saying, we're an amazing visual inspiration. Or check up from the neck up, like, oh, maybe all my excuses might be BS, because here's the person that can't use half their body and they're outperforming me. So
yeah. both of you, to me, I was just thinking, I was starting to type it in. I'm like, Allison, the most cheerful person I know, is like, we both live in Florida. Sorry, guys. So if I can even complain about the rain right now, I'm like, yeah, whatever. You've got nothing, Wendy, right now. So it truly is, I can confirm being around both of you is a huge inspiration. And it makes me in my daily life just say, wow, like they've got a really good attitude, and don't even think about having a bad attitude right now around these two, because they're going to check you on it, because you two are real. Not everyone's going to do that. You two will. In the most nice way.
Yeah, I got a question for you.
And
Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead. You first, please.
If I might add, Wendy talks about this all the time. Let's go outside the box. If you want to pay somebody to find a needle in the haystack, what better person to pay than a person with autism? Let's go out the box and research some of these, like Allison said, some of these different types of disabilities. We're not looking for, we don't want you to hire me to get a tax break. And we'll talk about that later. I want you to hire me because you think I'm the man. So let's go outside the box and look at our company and look at different types of disability. And we might be able to make some money by hiring people with disability, because we're good at certain things.
Right.
Jeff, question for you here.
Sorry. Go ahead, JC.
Well, I don't want to transition off the topic unless you're ready, though. Go right ahead, Wendy. Come on.
No, I was going to say the same thing as Jeff too. Is that we're in this world right now of finally we're in this world of diversity and inclusion. Right, we're finally here. the pandemic forced us to be here. Many things that happen in our global economy and the world and, civil unrest have forced us to be here. But so many people are still not thinking, so many employers are still not thinking of the diversity and inclusion of people with a disability who could actually be better employees than the ones they have now. So that's my take from an employer side. Like it doesn't make sense to not make it happen.
All right, Jeff, what do you wish that people in general would ask you or would listen to you about regarding being someone with a disability?
I don't like to be patronized. That's my big pet peeve. If you don't understand what I'm saying, if you don't believe that I spent 20 years making good money in another state, just say, Jeff, I don't see that. What I'm looking at doesn't equal what you're telling me. So don't patronize. Be honest with me. When you speak to me, don't shake your head if you don't understand. You are criticizing my intellectual. You're criticizing me by shaking your head like a bubble doll. Don't do it if you don't get what I'm saying. Give me the opportunity to clear up my speech and become comfortable and let me learn how to relay the message to you. But first, I need to know that you truly care. That's probably the short version of the last 3 minutes that I've been talking. I need to know that you care. Wendy Sellers has my back. And one of our first conversations was about people having my back. I need to know that people have my back.
What's a few of the ways that you've figured that out? I'm sure that there's been some tough lessons learned over a long span of time. But when you talk about finding that authenticity in other people, is it that genuine conversation, that connection, them being open and sharing with you? Or is it them asking certain questions along the way? Or do you feel that you have to coach them almost at times?
I have people that I call best friends in my life that I cannot talk about what I do for a living with. And when I was single for so long, I had trouble talking to them about the emotional struggles that I was dealing with as a result of being disabled. Just because they're my best friend doesn't mean they're my go-to person when it comes to my emotions as a person with a disability.
Allison, when you think back, let it be a day, a week, or decades, and by decades, probably only just one. You're not that old. Come on, let's be honest here. Know what I mean? So when you think back, though, can you think of instances where you feel as if you've been, or you felt that it was impressed upon you that you're less than somebody else? Were there situations like that, and how did that make you feel, or how did you deal with that?
That's like an everyday.
Really?
So
literally every day.
That I leave the house. So especially trips to Walmart, gotta find the good stuff there. But so running into people, and I actually have a great deal of patience and compassion and understanding for where they're coming from, because before I was a person with a disability, I had never met anyone that had lived life in a wheelchair. And so I was the first person I ever met with a disability. And so I remember what it's like to have all the misconceptions, the misunderstandings, and I remember what it's like not to know. So when I'm going through the grocery store or getting out of my car and putting gas in it, and people are like, oh my God, you're amazing. That's inspirational. That's just what I'm also hearing is like that they think that, or that is something special. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you should see me spearfish in Malaysia. Like, or which language and which country did I live in by myself? But you think pumping my gas is cool, like an impressive feat. So I'm constantly underestimated. But I understand also, I'm compassionate. Like they just don't know that they haven't been exposed to it. That's not their fault. I always look for their intention behind it. And if they have genuinely nice, and people with disabilities, my recommendation is really look at that person's intentions. If they're trying to be kind and connect with you, that's what matters. And so I work with people sometimes on how to respond to that so that you don't feel disempowered. You feel actually empowered to educate, depending on the mood you're in. And they've had lots of experiences of people underestimating me. And then I could later go into some different work experiences, but just on the daily, I think people aren't aware of my abilities because my disability is very visual.
I've got a question for both of you, for all of you, actually, anyone that wants to chime in on this one. When you're thinking about a disability, not all disabilities can be seen, right? And we're framing this in the aspect of abilities. Jeff, Allison, when we think of those people out there that may be listening to this, that do have a disability that you cannot see, what would you say to them to find the strength or empowerment or embrace that side of themselves in a way where they might be suppressing that or living with the secondary emotion that they're struggling with because they have this disability, but they're just not, it's not visibly seen. Like they might be misinterpreted by others.
Go ahead, Alex.
Okay. So each person will individually need to address like what are their abilities and what do people misunderstand most frequently. And I would encourage them to say, I experience this, this, and this, and not but, and this is how I navigate the world because of that. Right. So not discredit like, well, I do this and this and this, and I can't do this, this, and this versus, these are how I do things differently because of this experience. So like even just this, so I, as a therapist, I work with people that have invisible disabilities, whether it's PTSD, depression, anxiety, social anxiety, all kinds of disabilities, and encouraging them to say, okay, well, yes, this is your experience. And let's talk about how you handle it and how you can communicate to people how you navigate the world in a more empowering way so that they can have compassion, understand, assist you where you might need it, make accommodations, but they also, you and them can see your abilities and how to best accommodate.
Yeah, I think Jeff might be writing something. I have a feeling.
I'm good. Okay. Good. First off, why is it invisible? I had to get to the point where I had to explain to people what I was good at and what I'm not good at. So it's on me. Wendy knows this about me. A part of my product isn't about people with or without disability. It's about both of them. I hold people with disabilities to a high expectation. If I don't communicate with you what I'm good at and what I might struggle with, there's a problem there. I need to loosen up on my ego. I'm not 250 pounds full of muscle without a disability. And in GQ magazine, that's not me. Whether I want it to be or not, that's irrelevant. So I've got to get real with who I am and become okay with the man in the mirror so that I can go out there and be honest with employers with A, what I might not be good at, but B, make sure allow B to overrule A. Because when I tell you what I'm good at, you're going to forget about what I'm not good at. So, many job interviews over the past 6 years I've gotten because I disclosed my liability due to having CP.
Wendy, I've got a question for you. When we think about from the employer perspective, and we're looking at that constant feedback, right? Let it be a critical piece of feedback for an employee on a regular basis or intermittent basis. Real quick from the employer perspective, and then I'd like to also transition this just natural conversation as well over to Allison and Jeff. But Wendy, from the employer side of the house, when you're providing feedback to somebody with a disability, let it be in an interview process or as part of a regular cycle of feedback in the HR perspective, what are some things that you might want to consider that you might not currently be doing from the employer side?
Well, the interesting thing is most employers are currently not providing feedback to anyone, period, with a disability or not. Yeah. And so if, when you dive into this world of employing people with a disability, because you're missing out on, amazing workers, you really do have to kick it up a notch and actually start providing feedback. And that means actually having job descriptions that have reasonable accommodations written right in there, which will make it very clear for the employee, the candidate, like Jeff said, to say, I can do that, I can't, or I can do it 25% of the time, but not 100% is an accommodation. And so it's really just about having crystal clear expectations up front, regardless if there's ability or disability involved, and then having regular feedback all the time. And so it's interesting. A lot of this is already in what I talk about all the time in my talks and in my books about feedback, communication, and being prepared. And let's face it, most employers are not prepared. And I'm not saying that to knock employers. It's just the way it is. We wing things. We go through life. We hire people and we're like, oh, we didn't know there were these laws. We didn't know there's this. And then we find out the hard way there was. Now in the COVID era or post-COVID, whatever you want to call it, 2022, we'll just go from there. We have no choice but to be crystal clear with our expectations for all employees and provide feedback. Because if you don't, somebody else will, and they'll steal your employees, including those with a disability that, like Jeff said, will go 150% beyond your expectations, where maybe somebody without may not. They may just do the 100%.
And from more the employee perspective, Allison and Jeff, your thoughts on this, like when communicating with an employer, let it be in a critical feedback situation, or maybe there's something more you want to share. Jeff, you were hitting a home run there. You're talking about it's up to you to speak up for yourself, right?
I hit home runs all the time. And I've got to be where I need to be emotionally to accept criticism. That's part of my brand towards individuals preparing to go to work. When we go to work, we need to expect that somebody's going to say, Jeff, you need to speed up a little. Or, Jeff, I need you to work on this. I don't expect employers to walk on pins and needles because I'm not doing my job. Now, when we talk about not doing my job, am I not doing I care or am I struggling? What kind of enthusiasm am I am I giving you 150% or am I giving you 50? If I'm giving you 50, I would expect you to come to me, put me in the office and have a chat. Not a mean chat, but we can't be afraid to discipline people with disabilities. I mean, I've been bullied my whole life. So what? It's part of being me. When I go to work, I gotta fully expect that I'm gonna struggle in some areas. But if you don't point them out to me, you're not doing just to me or your business.
Allison.
Remind me of the topic. So we're talking about
feedback. So from like the employee perspective, you find yourself at work and there's that moment of critical feedback. Let it be positive or negative. Let it be your giving or receiving feedback in whatever the given scenario. A little bit from your perspective in that regard.
Yeah. I am pretty sure I was treated a lot like other employees, but that wasn't a great thing because my experience was that they had to, either quarterly reviews or whatever reviews, and they just were so uncomfortable with giving any criticism or calling anyone out on stuff that they just we'll just go everything 5 or I need to put a 4 or a 3, but there was no discussion. And then that was the same way for a lot of employees. So that actually, I noticed, enabled me to kind of lower my standards because I was like, okay, well, I'm exhausted. They're not going to call me out on it. So because I worked 5 years in community mental health, which, is known for burnout because you're working with the most difficult populations and doing multiple, very large caseloads with high trauma. And so they lost the opportunity. We wasted a bunch of time in paperwork when that could have been more conversations that would have been useful if they had talked to me like, hey, your notes are coming in late, but the more that they backed off of it, now seeing how well I do my job now that it's my own business, I realized that was not only part just getting burnout from the job, but also I wasn't getting the feedback that probably would have helped in an encouraging way.
When we're thinking about facing the workforce, maybe not all the time do we find that exact job or the right fit, or you're holding a position for a certain period of time and now you found yourself cut, or you're going through some sort of life transition and you can't get back on that stump in the same way that you used to. Allison, is there a certain level of shame associated with seeking out vocational rehab? Or is vocational rehab a resource that needs to be embraced more? Or is it not talked about enough? Is it just not understood enough?
I would guess it's not understood enough because everyone I've talked about has never even heard of it. And they're an amazing resource. Every state handles it a little bit better. I know when I was in California, they would hook you up. You got the best treatment. But even here in in Florida, they come out to your work site. They evaluate your work site. They have engineers that will evaluate, okay, does sitting in this position for too long make your back hurt? How can we give you a different table? And they're really amazing people, and they can come up with a lot of resources where it doesn't come out of the employer's pocket. It comes straight from Voc Rehab. So Voc Rehab will pay for wheelchairs, standing wheelchairs, cushions, transportation devices, whatever barriers are in the way of getting employed and staying employed. So it could be years of support, not just in the beginning to get the job, right? You could open that back up, say, hey, I'm struggling to keep this job. And that might be part of the feedback. Okay, you're having a difficulty in this area. Maybe we can get an engineer in here and see how we can support you to do this differently. Because
what's vocational rehab though? I mean, this is like a state sponsored thing? It's a national not-for-profit. What is it for people that aren't really aware of what vocational rehabilitation is?
And I'm not an expert in this because I've been hooked up with it since I was in high school, so since I was 15. But I believe it's a federally funded program operated at the state level. And who you have as a counselor matters. So if you don't feel like they're really advocating for you, they're not all created equally. And the budgets are not very defined. So you do have to advocate a little bit for yourself and your goals and what you need. So, and it is also, the person doesn't have to be receiving disability, like Social Security disability officially. They can just, as long as they recognize themselves as having disability, and at least a doctor will say they have a disability, folk rehab will help them out. That can be anywhere from anxiety to quadriplegia, developmental disabilities, right? Those are different. So they have a lot of resources. They can have coaches come on the scene. There's even resources I probably don't even know about based on everyone's individual disability and how good their counselor is.
And Wendy, I know you've got a few resources out there as well, some things that you've tapped into as a consultant in the past for others as well. What are some things from the employer side that you might be aware of that's out there that could be looked into a little further?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the interesting thing is when I was doing some research to prepare for this panel, there were some things that I didn't even know about and that Allison didn't know about and that Jeff didn't know about. And so for the people that are listening and watching this, like, don't feel bad that you didn't know about this. Just know about it now and look into it and move forward. But there's the disabled access credit. There's work opportunity tax credit. There's the vocational rehab, on the job training, training before and after school. And there's a ton of other resources too from the Department of Labor, from the Social Security Administration. And I'll be sure at the end of this that we'll make sure that everybody that's listening gets these resources. But all you have to do is go on to the Ask Jan network. So it's Ask, JAN, Job Accommodation Network.org. And you could spend 6 days on there because there's so much information. I was literally just on there yesterday helping another HR professional who called me and said, hey, I have a situation with somebody with temporary disability. And what do we do? And this person had just as much experience as I do in the HR world. And it took us a good 45 minutes on the phone call to figure out where we might even need to concentrate to make sure that the employer was properly accommodating, but we needed information, from other resources. So, if you're listening to this today, don't feel bad that you don't know the answers. We're all on here and we don't know the answers, but there's so much opportunity, and including Jeff typed in a tuition reimbursement too. And so there's a lot we can do to fill those gaps of the missing gaps of talent in the workplace, that we can solve staffing shortages on one side, but on the other side, solve employment barriers for people with disabilities. But it takes all of us, the employer and the employee/candidates, to be aware of this and educate each other respectfully, as Allison has mentioned, and Jeff too. And if you need to know anything, just ask Allison or Jeff, and we will make sure everybody gets their contact information.
Fantastic. Hey, one thing that I like to do on a lot of the shows that I help host, and I can't thank you enough for having me here today, I like to do a nice final thoughts. I like to go around the room and give everybody an opportunity to just say a few more things from their perspective in closing. But before we start that, Jeff, is it true you've got a book coming out soon? Is that right? Little Birdie told me you got a book coming out.
I credit Miss Sellers for, I've always wanted to write a book, but it was never reality. When I formed a relationship with Wendy, she said, you ought to write a book. And you know what we did? We wrote a book. So what's my book about? Hey, you're looking at it. It's a biography of my life. And I'm tearing up because when I read it, I don't tear up. But it's very emotional because I wrote a book on my life. And this book is going to change the world. And I believe that. Because what I do for a living is I'm trying to change perception of people with disabilities. And my book is about letting people know what it's like having a disability. what my mom went through, what my family goes through, what my fiance deals with daily. It's not a bad thing. It's the biggest asset I got, and I'm sharing it with the world. Hopefully, in the next few months, we'll be publishing it. We're working out some kinks, but my website is callonjeff.com. Please put that in your phone or wherever you put it. Check up on it once a week and see when my publishing date. All the details will be on the website. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I want to thank all of y'all for this call.
Appreciate you, Jeff. And Allison, over to you for some final thoughts on your side as well.
Well, I'm really excited for the book, both for people with disabilities and the community at large. That's super exciting. I think awareness is everything, especially you've got some years under your belt of living life and working and navigating. So that's really exciting. And I'm always continuing to learn and grow. And so like Wendy said, I love how she said it, like, it's okay that you don't know. It's better to come from a place of admitting you don't know and being cool with learning, because with disabilities, you probably don't know. And there's a lot out there that is possible. So I'm really encouraged about those thoughts. Thanks.
Ms. Wendy, some of your final thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Thanks everybody for joining. I've learned a lot, honestly, just preparing for this. And, I'm in the HR space. That's what I do for a living. I'm like, how did I not know this? And then I said, we got to tell everybody. We got to tell everybody what I just learned. And you two have so much to share. And as a world, we just have a lot to learn about each other, and we need to remove biases. But then at the same time, it goes both ways, right? And we just need to continue to educate each other. So thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And we will, anybody that is listening, connect with any of us. We'll get our contact information at the end and ask us anything.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure being here today. I'm JC. Really, at the end of the day, when you sit back and you listen to this, one of the things that stuck out for me today is it's not just the fact that these are actual abilities, but as much as that empowerment of inspiring other people through what it is that you do and who you are and the way that you interact with others. Let it be the way that we've all interacted today or the way that you carry that forward in your own lives. Ladies and gentlemen, drive safe. Have a good night.